Welcome to the Muse to Music podcast. This is actually episode 9 of Guitar Journeys. And I have with me today a very special guest I've known for a long time. I have Sir Stephen of Dudley here to talk about a new album coming out. Thank you so much, Steve, for being here. Really appreciate you
Yeah,
being on.
thank you, Rob. I really appreciate you having me. I really do.
Yeah, I'm excited you're here because we have new stuff to talk about. So, Steve has a lot of background history in terms of music, so we'll explore a couple of things. But the main focus of this episode is to touch on the newest album. It's actually a solo record that we're going to talk about today. So it's going to be really exciting. So I want to kind of get into a couple of questions. One is, uh, it can be a very in-depth question, but you can take as long as you want to answer it. The first question I want to ask you is why guitar? Since you are a guitarist.
Like, why did I play guitar?
Yeah.
Yeah, you know what? So I'm the youngest in my family growing up, right? I had older brothers, older sister, and we're kind of a musical family. And my my next oldest brother above me played guitar and had a band, garage band, so to speak, right? High school band. And so first of all, I always loved rock and roll, right? I grew up with rock and roll. My mom worked in a record store. So like we used to always get, back then it was the 45 singles. So
Yeah.
like we had a house full of all the top 40 hits like year after year. Like we just, whatever was in the top 40, we had the records, right? So like we were always listening to music. And then, as I became about 12, I guess, my brother had his high school band. And I just thought it was so cool, right? Watching the band play and I don't know why the guitar over the drums. My brother did play guitar, so I think it was probably just that younger sibling competition thing. Like I was like, I want to play guitar. But that's just really how I got into it. And the interesting thing is like I didn't know anything about guitar, but I always, when I watched my brother's band play, I always watched his hands. And even though I didn't understand music, the notes, the relationships, intervals, anything, um, I watched how he was playing bar chords, open position chords, and I before I even picked up a guitar, I had a pretty good idea of shapes. So when I actually did get a guitar, and I held that thing in my hand, like I didn't know what I was playing. I didn't know if it was a D chord, a G chord, but I knew the shapes already just
Yeah.
from watching for like 2 years.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I picked it up pretty quick once I got my own guitar.
Yeah. Yeah. It's a good sort of advancement. You feel like advanced already just from actually having, had the oral sort of
Yeah,
oral, but
yeah,
oral too, but also the visual really kind of preps you into the actual mechanics when you get onto it, which is pretty interesting. Yeah, it's that's a great opening salvo into this whole scene here. So following that, being that you have influence from your brothers and the musical family and the record store, what was the first album of influence for you? Is there a certain album that kind of kicked it off even further in terms of the guitar?
Well, well, again, spanning when I was really young, right? And like I said, we had all the records being bought from because my mom worked at a record store. I grew up with my older brothers listening to the Beatles and Led Zeppelin and the Rolling Stones, right? Like it was really like that kind of stuff. Even Cream. It was a lot of that guitar influenced rock. Um, when I was finally old enough to start buying my own records, but I still don't think I played guitar at this point in time. Believe it or not, I always remember this because I saved my money. I had a newspaper route, and my mom drove me to the record store, and I bought 3 records, and they were like $4.99 each. And believe I bought Foreigner's first album, I bought The Cars' first album, and I bought Double Live Gonzo by Ted Nugent.
Wow.
And and as cool as the Foreigner album and the Cars album are, right? Because both of them are masterpieces. The Nugent album was just like eye opening from a guitar playing perspective. And I listened to that album over and over and over. And, I had to watch what I played because there's some language on there and
Yeah.
some topics. And my mom was like, what the heck did you just buy? You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
So I learned pretty quick, like can't play that song right now if my parents were home, or you know what I mean. But
Right.
obviously Stranglehold's the obvious, but Great White Buffalo and Stormtrooping, and I mean I could go on and on. The album's a masterpiece, that really made me be like, what, like that's guitar playing, man.
Yeah. Yeah, live albums are like, for a lot of people are like the thing that launches them into the instrument because you're hearing the full effect. You're hearing the crowd, you feel the energy coming off the album. That's really kind of the
Absolutely.
testament to a good live record is like, what is the energy coming off of this thing? And
Yeah.
that just further, gets you into more crime, musically, which is great. So that's good. That's a good, nice trio of influence right there. That's pretty cool.
Yeah. Yeah.
And kind of touching on the young thing, I don't know if you want to add something else before I ask you the next a little bit.
Yeah, well, I was just gonna, I guess, just say like the thing that really put me over the top and said I want to play guitar, was because I remember the day I heard it was the opening riff to Spirit of Radio. Like I always remember where I was when I heard it. I was in my big brother's truck, and we were taking like a load of trash to the landfill,
Sure.
and we were listening to, I don't know if I could say the station, but we were listening to WRCN on Long Island.
Oh yeah, sure. Yeah.
And I just remember the DJ saying, we have the brand new record from Rush,
Mhm.
and we're going to play the first release. And I had always heard of Rush, but I never knew a song that they played. I had no idea, but heard the name. And as soon as that riff started, I just never heard anything like it. Like, I was like, that's the most amazing guitar riff I've ever heard. And that was it. That was like, Mom, I want a guitar for my birthday.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, you can't really go too wrong with Rush at all. I mean that, and of course the radio thing is perfectly in line with how we got into music in the first place, as players. It was all the radio, RCN, BAB, it's like,
Yep.
you
Yeah,
know,
absolutely right. There was
W.
no there was no internet, there was no anything. It was like you listened to the radio, you waited for your song to come on, you called the radio station, could you please play the new Rush song, right?
Yeah,
And they were like, we'll try to get to it. And you sat there in front of the radio hoping that this tune was going to come on.
yeah.
Yeah, and
And if
that's how
you
we
caught
did
it,
it.
yeah, that's right. That's right. And if you caught it in time, you had your cassette player ready to go.
Absolutely. Right. Absolutely. Record it. And and then you had it, on your little cassette player. So that was fun back then.
It was, and it kind of keeping in line with the journey a little bit in terms of youth. Um, in terms of getting into the instrument and playing it, what would you say, was like the most artistic musical thing that you were proud of in your youth getting into the guitar?
That's a good question. Um, I guess what I was most proud of was when I decided I was probably about 13 and I had only been playing for about a year and a half. And I decided I was going to try out for the rock ensemble in the junior high school.
Oh, nice.
And, you know, I didn't know if I was good enough, but they did take me. And it was, one of the best experiences, ever. You make good friends, right? You learn, you make your musical friends in the band, and the field trips we did, and the growth of, what you learn about music beyond the guitar, right? And playing with other instruments and learning your spot. And like when you play guitar, right? Like talk about Ted Nugent and the riff and rush. And so it's like you're always dreaming like I'm going to be this guitar god, right? Like all these riffs and but when you start playing in something like rock ensemble in school or jazz ensemble, right? You learn very quickly that there's a place for you in the big picture of the sound, right? And you may have a moment where you're going to have to make your statement, right? But it's not just 5 minutes of, shred city, right? That it's very important to play rhythm guitar and the chords that you play to fit right in the landscape of sound. So, and that was probably the thing I guess that I'm most proud of, is because that took a lot to learn. You think you're just jumping in and you're like, watch what I could do, right? But it's not about that, right? It's about being a team player and learning how to play the song. And that means learning how to play rhythm and chordal accompaniments and all of those things. And that 30 seconds you get a chance to take a little solo, that's your chance to say something. And that's your opportunity to make sure that what you say makes a statement, because that's the only moment you have.
Yeah, that's such a paramount message for anyone like playing right now, whether you're learning or you've been going for it for a while. That's a huge takeaway, is the fact that, you know, you're trying to find the right moments to do your thing and still do your thing, you know, but it's like you said, it's got to fit in the landscape of what's happening, you know. So that's a huge takeaway. I can't say it any more than I just did. So kind of moving a little bit forward into the style that you're doing and you've been at for a bit, leading into the new project. Um, Being I have some background on your playing. We both came up, you know, at the same time. We both went to school together, and this kind of falls in line with the new release that's coming out for you. What would you say the lines? What where did the lines emerge between like classical and progressive? Because we were kind of discussing a little bit before we kind of kicked off, leading into this sort of new channel, this new record that's coming out for you. Do you see any like emergence between, you know, the kind of music you grew up playing into what's happening currently for your the new record? What would you say would that be?
So, well, I guess, you know, to some extent, right? Everything you've been, everything you've listened to, it's all part of you, right? So even for me, as I try with this new recording to do something I've never done before as a composer and player, you can't help but have those influences still somewhere fit in there. Like, you know, as I'm starting to share the new music, you know, with people like yourself, the feedback I get as I'm sitting here saying, well, you know, it's instrumental guitar and it's something I've never done before. People say to me, but no, it's still kind of proggy. You know what I mean? And it's like, I don't hear it, right? Because to me, I feel like, no, it's not, right? But when you sit and you listen, and some of the influences, as example, right? Being a progressive, I can't shake the time changes, right? So even though this is a guitar-based drum, you know, fast-paced, instrumental, fun kind of thing, the opening tracks in 11/8, right? So all of a sudden you start thinking like, I got 11/8, 5/4, you know, 7/8 section here, you know. So the time change aspect of progressive music still is prevalent in my new release. What's much less prevalent is the compositional key changes, you know, taking you to different, there's not as many mood breaks, like the soft part, the quiet, you know, like this is pretty consistent, like it's just rock and roll, let's go. So but from a time change perspective and a rhythmic perspective and the interplay between the bass and the drums with the guitar playing over it, I can definitely see where people will still say like, you know, I could still hear the unified pass somewhere underneath there. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah. No, it's good. You can't really, as they always say, you can't escape your influences. And like, you know, and actually it's one of those natural things as a player. And if you have a certain fan base, they're sort of, I wouldn't say expecting it, but they know that that's going to be a component. It's just, there's no escaping that, which is great. I think that I find that more interesting, you know, as you hear someone and you see their evolution, you hear their evolution musically. Those are the things that kind of keep you, you know, locked in, you know, to a player or a band. Because there's not, I wouldn't say expectation, but it's like you're kind of waiting to see what's going to happen. That's the one thing that's cool about anybody that's putting out a record that you followed for a bit, is like, okay, what's the next thing that's going to happen? You know, what's the next thing that's going to go? Like, is there an experiment here? Like, what is it going to be? And with this new record, that desire to have fun and still have, you know, certain things that are natural to your style of playing, how you write, you know, that's the thing that I'm interested in as a listener too. Like, where is it going to go? You know, so that's the thing I'm excited about when I knew you were going to put this new album out. It's like, this is going to be, I'm interested to hear what's gonna transpire musically.
Yeah.
So that's something that I can't stress enough. And that was the thing too when you sent over some info about the record, that desire to have fun, you know, however that kind of transpires and goes about, and what the activity is going to be, is going to be really interesting, to get the full picture. And I think you mentioned that this is coming out in April, I think, right? This is when it's slated for this year, 2025.
Yeah, it's definitely, it's definitely going to be out sometime in the late spring. I don't think it'll take until summer, but we're just in the final, I'm talking with, hopefully my previous label, but once we get through, what are we going to do? Release it. It's just got to go out for mastering, and then, we're pretty good. So, but yeah, I mean, the thing about just wanting to have fun, right? It's like I always felt as a co-composer in a progressive rock band, especially the last recording, which hard to believe it's like 9 years ago now, but like with shifting the equilibrium with Unified Past, it was a lot of pressure because it was like, obviously there's so many great progressive rock bands. And if you're going to try to put something out there to even get any level of recognition with fans, right? It's got to be something, right? There's got to be something that people say, wow, this is worth me exploring a little more. So I always felt a lot of pressure trying to like, does this work, right? And there's so many times where I would feel like maybe I'm overthinking this, right? Because you're like, oh, that part don't work, or you know what I mean? And so when I decided I was going to do this new project, it was like, I just need to have fun. I just want music to be fun. I don't want it to be a burden. I don't want it to be a weight on my shoulders. Instead, I want it to be just like, let's have a blast. And that's really what I tried to do with this recording.
Yeah, that's great. That's really cool. Now, was there a particular song, excuse me, was there a particular song or, any kind of scoring that you did for this that would be like, um, I guess maybe akin to like the history of like when you got into, the fusion of styles that you've come to be known for doing actually with all the projects you've done?
Well,
Is there anything like that, like history wise?
I would say, again, it probably reveals itself at a little bit more sub layer of the composition structure. But I would say, yeah, there's like there's a song, Electric Eagles, right? That's actually the name of the song, Electric Eagles. I believe it's track number 7. And that song, you're going to hear probably not that it's very funky, but it's the most funk I've ever put in a guitar part, right? Like, so, there's a little funk in there. Then there's, like an AC/DC type groove, which, I'm really into that rock, that hard rock, bluesy kind of sound. And then towards the end of the song, where the main guitar lead kind of really takes over, it is a little bit more of like a proggy section that I'm playing over. So I would say that song might kind of have the most different influences that I've had in a song.
That's cool. I'm definitely looking forward to that. That fits pretty much too with like the idea of prog is that you progress from style to style. That's detracting for me as somebody who listens to progressive rock is that movement through styles. It doesn't have to go that way, but that's sort of the heart a bit of like what the style does. It kind of moves you through these different. I mean, moods is a good word too. You mentioned moods before, but just the stylistic component just kind of gives you your ears a bit more to kind of latch onto. So that's cool. I'm definitely interested in hearing that. I think you had the Electric Eagle in the teaser track for this record too. Was he in there in the
Yeah,
artwork?
no, actually, that's the last song, which is
Okay.
actually my favorite song. That's why I decided to put it out in the teaser.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that one's called Tributary.
Okay.
So that's the one that you'll hear in the trailer. Yeah.
Okay. Oh, sweet. Yeah. And by the way, everybody, all the links for what we're talking about today are going to be right below the video, as they always are. So you can check out, where you can get the record, anything related to this discussion, you're going to find below when you see the video. So in terms of collaborations, now this record is pretty much like just yourself doing everything, pretty much, right? So has there been any well, I guess collaboration would be the thing, not so much for this record, but maybe in terms of who's going to take care of, like you mentioned, the mastering and things like that. So how have the collaborative experiences been leading up to this particular moment of putting out this record? Anything you can share about that? A little piecemeal?
Well, yeah, well, it's an interesting point. Actually, some and I will not use the word failed collaborations, but some collaborations that just didn't make it to the finish line is actually what led me to here.
Okay.
So, I was working with some very talented musicians going back, I think it was around 2019. So I was working with drummer Roger Banks and Long Island bassist Lenny Rosillo, amazing individual. And we were writing some songs, very, very proggy. And we actually recorded probably 4 songs, and of course they're prog, so it's probably about 30 minutes worth of music, right?
Right.
And we were really off to a good start. And then, I don't know, it just kind of came to a halt. And, I know both of those musicians also have, careers and, other things they're working on. And so I think some other things may have, took precedent. And then I just kind of started doing something different. And then the pandemic hit and it just kind of, so, so at the same time of me working on this, I do still have progressive music that I'm writing, and it's there. I probably have close to 2 albums worth of material in its, compositional infancy.
Okay.
So, and that's what I plan to start working on once I get through the release of this. So, and then, yeah, there'll be more collaborations, with people, who helps me on that is yet to be determined, but that is what I plan on doing, but that'll probably be 2026. For this year, I want to really focus on Sir Stephen and Dudley.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So I know that you're doing a lot of the sounds yourself, like in particular, doing MIDI, right? Using so that medium to kind of create. So how does that work in terms of like what you're putting together, towards the music and the sounds you have on this record? Is there any procedural things or?
No, yeah, so I play all the guitar parts. I play the majority of the bass parts. There are a few bass sample parts and things like that, but I know a lot of people frown on it, and I get it. Not everybody's gonna want to hear that. It's MIDI drum performance and et cetera, et cetera. But it worked for me, and I think what's important is approaching the music, even if it's a MIDI composed drum track. It has to feel right, right? Like your ears can listen to it and say, that's a loop, right? Or and listen, in today's music, right, that's valid anyway, right? I mean, there's plenty of songs where that technology is what drives the song.
Right.
But in this type of music where it's really just like a hard rock thing, you could take a MIDI drum part and just continue to copy paste, copy paste, copy paste, right? And it's keeping the beat and it's good, but it's not very interesting. And
Right.
I think it would become very evident very quickly that there's no way that's a drummer, right? Because it's like so what's really important is I approached the parts compositionally, right?
Yep.
Like I've been listening to music for 50 years, right? So it's like and you and I went to school, we took composition, and you know what I mean, like you understand. Even though I don't actually play the drums, I mean, you get it, right? Like you understand that this needs to be this type of a beat, or this needs to be that, and then a fill should go right here, and then it should be so I probably spent the most time on this whole recording trying to make sure that the drums felt as natural as they could, and that they worked with the bass part I played.
Yeah.
So really a lot went into it. Like some people might think it was just like I said, copy paste, blah blah, do this, but actually the parts were pretty well constructed to feel as natural as they could.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's nothing different more than like an actual drummer, composing parts and playing them to fit, the bass part. So it's not really too far. You're not going too far off the reservation in terms of, how you would put a drum part to a tune. It's gotta fit within the landscape, bringing back that part of like you being in the rock band in junior high, and you have to fit into the landscape of what's going on. So there's not much different. I mean, that's a whole other podcast episode in and of itself, and using samples. But like you said, it's a huge part of what happens in music now. And with all the recording programs and software, you have these things that are in there. You have things like Splice where you can put things in, and it's really the idea that it germinates an idea for you, and then you can take that and run with that in a creative format. So like I said, it's like it's not just copy paste a loop of a beat. You have to compose these things because it has to fit within the scope of what you're trying to do. So I don't see any harm in that at all. It's like it's the aim is to put something out that's something that fits your goal and your aim of having fun, and that's going to be the reflection of the music. It's like, what does it sound like at the end? So that's the curiosity that I have too, and I'm sure a lot of listeners out there of this are going to feel the same way of any new record, especially yours. Like, okay, well, what's going to happen here? So whether drums are programmed or not is, I guess it's like it's not even an issue. It's like, what is the overall presentation? What is the song going to say to the people who want to hear it? So that's great. I'm glad you kind of clear that up because it's something that, like you said, it could be a point of contention, but it doesn't really matter in the grand scheme.
Yeah, I get it, right? There's always musical purists, and I could have hired a drummer, right, and played the same thing that you're going to hear. But for me, it was about really I felt like this was just my project, and I just really wanted it to be, because listen, I'm not the best bass player, right? But like I could have hired a better bass player, but I just wanted it to be, like I said, me having fun. This record is not meant to be taken seriously, but at the same time, I'm hopeful that the listener experiences it the way I do. And in that lightheartedness, it's just a lot of fun to listen to.
Yeah. Well, lighthearted is a great word because, especially, now we need to have like nice lighthearted stuff because, like I said, music could be very, very serious business, and very involved. So the idea of levity and fun is never an element that we stray from. We want to have that fun. We want to experience, energy from the tunes that we hear. So I think it's a great time for this record. I have to say that because it's something it's definitely needed. I know I need it. So, and I hope you guys do too. And again, everything's gonna be below in the description of the video for you guys to check out. So I'm totally jazzed for this. So I would say the next thing I want to ask you about, and there's only a couple more things I'll ask you about today,
Okay.
is out of all the instruments you own, what comes across best in this recording and why?
Yeah, well, so that's actually a simple question for me. So I have no problem. I can say guitar names and everything on here.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, yeah,
Okay.
absolutely.
So I have a nice collection of guitars that I've assembled, probably like we all do, right, as guitar players. I mean, at my age, I've assembled, I've acquired guitars through the years. So I bought a Jackson that was custom made for me. So I ordered it in 2019, right before the pandemic. And again, the pandemic hit and everything, I think, as we all know, right, kind of
Oh
went.
yeah.
So I got the guitar in 2023. And so that guitar is primarily the instrument that you hear on this entire recording. And
Okay.
it is by far my favorite axe that I own.
Yeah.
The playability, the sound, it fits this style of music so well. If I was doing something different, I would probably still use that guitar. But I do have some other guitars to take me in some other musical directions. But for this recording and the style of music it is, the Jackson was just a slam dunk.
Nice. Is that the Jackson that's got the reverse headstock that you sent in the presser?
Yes.
That's the
Yeah.
one? Okay. Cool. Okay. Yeah, I'll include that in here somewhere. So that's awesome. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's a
So
good.
it's just a great instrument. I mean, obviously I think everybody knows Jackson's a great instrument, but I never owned one, right? And I can honestly say like this thing is just a masterpiece.
Yeah, that's so cool. Yeah. So they made it to your specs, the radius of the neck and all that jazz.
Yeah, and I have a small
Right.
hand, right? And
Yeah, me too.
you and I studied, right, with
Yeah.
Jerry Willard. So one thing I always remember from Jerry Willard was and I don't know if he ever said this to you, but like one day during a lesson, I was not playing something, right. And he said to me, you gotta stretch your fingers not hitting it, at the right spot. And I'm like, look at my hand. I'm like, I'm 5'4", you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And said to me, like, it has nothing to do with the size of your hand. Right. You know, like, it was like, do not use that as a reason why you can't do something. And I
Right.
always remember that.
Yeah. 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 He was good like that. He had, he still is good like that. He has all these analogies and things like that that he uses, and you get the message, it's like, okay, all right, all right. So he was a motivator, and
Absolutely.
still is. He's still with us. So it's really cool. But yeah, fond memories of that. And speaking of influence in that regard, has family/friends influenced your writing for this record in any way, or?
No, honestly, no. Like, this was just, stuff that when I'm practicing, all of a sudden I'm kind of like, oh, that sounds like a good little riff. So you tape it, right? And I have, probably, like, I'm sure a lot of people do this, but like, I have a folder on my hard drive with just a lot of noodling, and I have them all labeled. And every once in a while, you kind of take them and you go, wait, I think this might work with that, and then all of a sudden it starts to become a composition.
Yeah. Yeah. It's kind of that one event leads to the next event, the natural progression. So I guess another thing I can ask you too, before we get close to wrapping this up, are there, speaking of like the catalog of ideas, are there any like recurring musical themes
Ha,
that have
that's
come into this record?
So that's a great question, Rob. Because I that's how I write. You know what I mean? And sometimes people don't get it. They'll be like, "Oh, that song sounds like that." So I'm like, "Yeah, it's supposed to, right?" Like, this
Yeah,
is a concept album. No, this is like totally like they're just 10 individual tracks. They have nothing to do with each other. Nothing makes a reappearance in another song. There's no like reprise or no. This is all just each one's a unique song.
that's cool. And just the idea that's a full album, because it's always about this. Well, I wouldn't say it's always, but nowadays it seems to be returning back to, singles and whatnot. So I'm an album guy. I got to hear a whole album. Even if it's like an EP. I want to hear a collective. Not just a couple songs here and there. So I'm very much into that. So that's exciting. So I'm really excited for you for this record. I'm sure it's been a journey, like you mentioned, to get to this point. You gotta feel good going into this, I guess, right? I mean,
Yeah, I do. Like, what I mean, listen, here's my goal, right? I want people to know, like, I can play guitar. Like, I do want to be in a band. And I don't at this stage, I'm not looking to be the leader of the band. I want to be part of a band. And I'm kind of hopeful that this record will show a different side of my composing and my playing, that if people combine that with what I've done in the progressive music, they might understand I'm not just one dimensional, right? And as you know, right? I mean, I could play classic guitar, although I don't play it like I used to. But I mean, I could play a lot of different styles, and I think I can add a lot of value to a band, both compositionally and performance wise, plus throw in an occasional background vocal or lead vocal. So I'm kind of hoping on the one hand that this recording will do that, and just kind of showcase what we can do a little bit. I'm not trying to make a statement with this to say, like, here comes the next Joe Satriani or Steve Vai, because that's not at all. I'm just not that at that level, but B, that's not what I'm trying to do. I just wanted to have 10 songs, like I said earlier, that just like if these were on ESPN Sports Center in the background while they're showing their clips, you'd be like, that's a good little riff. Because I know whenever I'm watching Sports Center and I hear the music in the background, that rocks, man. You know what I mean?
what is that song?
So
Yeah.
I was just trying to kind of do that. But one thing I guess I'd like to mention is the way this record came to light really was, we talked about the collaborations, and they didn't really, that music never really made it to the end, right? So I started writing a couple of riffs, and I was like, oh, these sound like just like good hard rock songs, which again, very different from me, right? I don't write hard rock. So the first three songs that I wrote for this were actually intended to be songs with vocals.
Okay.
And then what happened was I said, I can't sing these songs, right? My voice is melodic, I can sing like a nice mellow tune, but hard rock, I just don't have the voice for it. So again, if I'm doing the whole record, I'm like, I was kind of like, well, what do I do? Right. Because either I try to sing this,
Right.
or I start trying to figure out what key could I put this song in where maybe my voice will be passable. And I didn't feel like that was going to be good enough. So I said, I'm just going to play guitar and use that as the melody instead of sing.
Okay.
So the first three songs were really written as songs with vocals and were never intended to be like, quote, guitar instrumentals.
Yeah.
So I don't know if other guitar instrumentalists write that way, but like these were actual songs. And then instead of a singer, I said, yeah, I'll just solo over the verses. Um, then once I had a few songs, that's when I said, you know what? I think I'm just going to make a guitar album. And as I got to the 10th song, then the song started to become a little bit more with the thought in mind that this is a guitar instrumental. So as you listen to the 10 songs, now that you know that, I bet you could tell what songs started off as they were supposed to have a singer versus what songs actually became like this was written for the guitar.
Yeah, that's an interesting point because it's like, you don't really get that too much. Sometimes first impression on the instrumental, especially, is like, well, these were designed in a certain way. So that's the kind of the fly on the wall stuff that I like, is a little bit of the background of how the song came to evolve into what it is pretty amazing, because we start out creatively with maybe an idea and we don't know where it's going to go. And that's half the fun. And that's what's great about records like this is that the creative process is such that you'd like to kind of maybe get an inkling into what it is, but sometimes that's not a good thing to get an inkling into it. So the fact you're talking about this is great because it just kind of piques my interest even more to like what I'm going to be hearing, what's going to come. So that's fantastic that you brought this up because we don't really know sometimes what the actual background is going to be about. And I think even coming up, we didn't know what the creative process was to any song,
Right.
until we got like into like MTV age. You start to see the people and you see what they look like, and you didn't know what they looked like till you went to see the concert. You had no idea. So it's like the idea of the musical part, being revealed a little bit, kind of unmasks a little bit of the creative, just a little bit, where you don't want the full Monty, so to speak, in terms of like, okay, this went this direction. It's nice to leave a little bit of mystery in there. So the fact you're bringing this up now is great because we talked a bit, about the lead up, in terms of personal history into the creative process. And now you're mentioning that the tunes a bit more, which is great. That's kind of was my hope, on this episode to kind of
Yeah.
speak some of those little things, that you're revealing, which is great. I love it.
Yeah, I think, I mean, that's to me, that was always the thing that like I find interesting about this recording is it started off, it was just going to be like, new songs with a singer. And then it was like, well, wait a minute, like, no, I'm just going to play guitar. And then the more you start playing guitar, the more you start saying, okay, well, now I'm really going to write a song on purpose that's supposed to be a guitar instrumental. Where originally it was just supposed to be a singer, and I just decided to play guitar instead of a vocal line.
Yeah.
So there's definitely a morphing between the 10 songs. And they don't go in order that way. They're all mixed up. Like the opening track was definitely a guitar instrumental track. But there's definitely songs dispersed in and out of there where it's like that was really just going to be a song that could have had a singer with a verse and a chorus and a verse and a chorus, and hopefully could have been on the radio. And now it just decided to make it a guitar instrumental. But then there's other ones that are just like meant to say like this is a guitar song.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's good. It's a nice polarity between the two approaches, like it's good. Yeah, the song like type of perhaps song like approach, but definitely guitar is the forefront for sure. I love that. That's an expectation that waiting to see how that pans out. I'm super excited for you for that. So that's good. I'm glad you mentioned these things, towards the end here that kind of lead into, you know, the anticipation of this record coming out. I'm over the moon for it. So happy for you that this is happening, and
Thank you.
interesting that it's happening in this way. It's like, to get to this point, of your musical evolution and your journey to kind of arrive now, at this moment is like all things seem to happen at the right time, in the right way. So I don't know if you feel that.
Yeah, I think you do. You're right, because I was working on this for a long time, probably 4 years, and there were times where I just took a break from it, like months, like just you know, and then revisit it again. Okay, let's turn the equipment on and let's revisit this. And I never felt like I wanted to rush it. Right. I never felt like, oh, I got to get this out. I don't. Nobody's, nobody's waiting for my next record. Right. So I said, what's important is when this comes out, I have to feel like I'm ready for people to hear this. And, it just finally got to that point, like in the fall, where it was just really, I had 10 songs now and they all felt pretty good. And, then you start mixing them, and then it was, now I feel good about it. Like I said, it's always for me, I'm certainly uncomfortable, I guess, because I've never put myself out here like this. When you're in, a band like Unified Past, I'm one of four people. And it's, everybody has their moment to shine within the music. And I feel like with this, like this is all like, like if somebody didn't like something I did in a Unified Past song, they may still love the drums or the vocals, and they might be like, overall, they love the band, or just, that part wasn't so good. But like, this is all me. And, you know, people are either going to like it or they're not going to like it. And, that is a little intimidating to me, but I got to the point where I'm like, listen, this is why we're artists, right? Not everybody's going to love what we do. Not everybody's going to get where we were at that moment of time to write what we wrote. But I feel good enough about it that, whether somebody likes it or not, I feel comfortable that I did the best I could with this.
Yeah. Yeah. That's really the end game too, is like you have to be satisfied with the work because you're the ones going to be playing it for the next some odd years. So that's really the thing too for anybody out there that's writing. It's like you got to keep that in mind where it's like you have to be happy with it. It's not about the mass appeal. It is nice to have that, of course. You want to, reach people and have that connection with an audience, but at the end of the day, you have to be happy with what you wrote because you're going to perform it, in whatever capacity. And so you have to be at a point where you're not gonna be tortured by it. Like, oh, I gotta play that song again. Oh, yeah, that
Yeah.
that is not good. When you arrive at that point, it's like, I can just imagine some of the songs, the classic songs we know. It's like, how many decades have they played this song? It's like, how do they feel about it? So because it depends if you're writing it for yourself and then sharing it, you don't mind so much because you're always excited about it.
Yeah.
So I think for you, that seems to be the case where it's like you had this excitement level for the music where it's like, if you were to go out and gig these songs for the next 15, 20 years, you could easily do that. No problem whatsoever. It would never be torture for anyone, yourself or the listener. There's got
Yeah.
to be a thing, right? Yeah.
Yeah. And the one thing that's fun about this, like I said, I wanted it to be fun, is when it does get to the point that you take it live, and you are playing with a bass player and a drummer. It lends itself to, I don't want to, that improvisational point where you could play this song night after night, any of these songs, and continue to evolve the parts, right?
Yeah.
So you're not locked into that, verse, chorus, for this is how the song goes. Like, I think the songs, when played live, even if you followed second by second, 3 minutes and 30 seconds, this is the song we play. You can still change up your solo. You can still change up the ideas you're having, right? So I think in that way you can continue to keep the song fresh, and that's kind of what I find exciting about finally being able to take some of this stuff and play in front of an audience. And it's inevitable that over a period of time, the stuff that's on the recorded version will change
Yeah.
the more you play live.
Yeah. I love that. That's a great point because it's, as a fan, as somebody who wants to hear the new music coming out, that's the thing that's the next sort of thing that you're thinking of is like, okay, what's the evolution going to be now the music's out, it's alive, it's in the atmosphere, breaking up the atmosphere. So to have that as a thing, as a component, it's like, that's the next thing as a fan is like, okay, what's gonna, if it goes live, in terms of a live performance, what's gonna go on with this? What's gonna happen? So that's another exciting component. And the fact that it's open enough like that, where it's not gonna be just like the record, there's gonna be changes here and there because it's gonna evolve, like you said, into the live thing, perhaps, where now you have another journey. You have the sitting at home with your cans on, in your house, in your listening area, and then you go out and you see something, and it's like that. Well, oh, that's so cool how that part went to this and etc. So that's exciting. That's another exciting component to the
Yeah,
thing.
because what happens is, right, if you're going to take this music out there and it's going to be a band, right, now you have the bass player and the drummer, and it's important not only for them to put their touch on it, but they're going to have their moments. Whereas on the recording, most of the moments are the guitar,
Yeah,
right? But when you're playing live and you give the other musicians their moments, and that elongates the songs a little bit sometimes or changes the dynamic of the song. But because there has to be involvement and interplay between everybody.
right. Yeah, that's a good end goal for any live situation for sure. It's great. So yeah, if it goes to that part, that's gonna be another exciting journey too. So yeah, pretty cool. Yeah. So anything you want to say in closing before we wrap up? I'm excited as heck for this. I don't know about you guys out there listening to this, but
Yeah, I just think thank you very much for for inviting me on. Thanks to people like yourself. Otherwise, the music doesn't get heard or people aren't aware of it. So, thank you, Rob, for having me today. Um, but I just welcome any feedback. Like I said, it would be interesting to see what people think. You never know, right? So obviously, it might be more people like it than you thought, right?
yeah,
Or it could be the opposite. But like I said, I'm just excited about being able to put myself out there, and I'm trying to showcase. The whole point of this is I was just trying to showcase something that listen, I've recorded six unified past recordings, and they are progressive rock, and I'm proud of them. But I really wanted to put something out there to showcase to people that I can play other styles of music besides progressive rock, and that I can have fun, and I just different types of compositional techniques, and I'm really just using this hopefully to showcase a different side of my playing that I hope people will recognize. Simple as that.
it's beautiful, really beautiful. And I thank you for the years of the music you have created for everybody to listen to kind of share and to be, fans of. So thank you for that. That's it. Without you putting the music out there, we wouldn't be doing this right now. So that has to be something that has to be acknowledged. So thanks to you for doing what you do. It's really important to have that contribution into this crazy world we live in. So no matter what time frame we live in, thank you for that. That's, again, we wouldn't be sitting here if that wasn't the case. So I really appreciate that. And congratulations many times over for this new upcoming release. I think you guys are going to be thrilled about it. Again, everything is going to be below this video of where you can check it out when the time comes, and you can have all the stuff below if you want to follow Steve and check things out. All the updates, whatever's happening, it'll all be down the bottom for you to check out and explore. So thank you, Sir Stephen of Dudley. I feel very, very honored to have such musical royalty to interview today. So,
Well, thank you so much. Like I said, it's been a blast chatting with you today. Thank you so much, Rob.
awesome, man. All right, guys. Thank you so much. And we'll see you on the next one. Thanks for coming by and checking everything out. Appreciate it. Take care.